Our topic is on photosynthesis. Now, when you were still in your elementary and high school, you are very much familiar with photosynthesis. So you have the word photo means light, synthesis means formation. And this occurs in the chloroplast. Now, I'm bringing to you the structure of the chloroplast. Last time we talked about the cell parts and functions, and one of the cytoplasmic organelles in plant cell is the chloroplast. So this is now the structure. Now the chloroplast is a double membrane structure consisting of the outer membrane and the inner membrane. Now inside the inner membrane, you could see the coin-like structures. We call that as the thylakoids, plural, thylakoid singular. So it looks like coin. And these are where the pigments are formed or found. Now, the pile of this thylakoid, we call that as the granum, singular, plural, grana. And the space here where thylakoids are embedded is what we call as the stroma. Now, you have to remember this because these important sites are actually, or say, these important structures are very important sites for photosynthesis. Now, generally, we have this formula for photosynthesis. Now, here, we have the raw materials for photosynthesis. This one. So, it's what are the raw materials, important raw materials for photosynthesis. You have water, and then you have carbon dioxide, and we have the light, plus of course the green pigment chlorophyll. Okay, so you have now the green pigment chlorophyll. Now what is then the role of this chlorophyll? Now this green pigment chlorophyll is the one that would trap the light so that there would be synthesis of sugar out of light. Of course, with the aid of these important raw materials, water, and of course you have this. Carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a raw material for photosynthesis, but this can be used in the dark reaction, so without light. And water is used with the presence of light. Now, the end products of photosynthesis are the glucose and oxygen. So you have the 6,6-H12O6, which is glucose, and we have the oxygen. Now, what are the steps in photosynthesis? Now, this is actually these are the diagram that will help you understand the process of photosynthesis, so you could easily understand this process. Now, the steps are light reaction, which occurs in the thylakoid. So this one here, you could see, of course, with the presence of the pigments, chlorophyll. You have chlorophyll A and B for plants. So the green pigments, you could see it here. Okay. Now, and the second is the dark reaction. Okay. So the dark reaction which occurs in the stroma. This is the space where the thylakoids are embedded. That's where the dark reaction occurs. Now light reaction has two types. You have the acyclic photophosphorylation. When we say a means not cycle. So you have acyclic, meaning no, it's not cycle. This process does not involve cycle. Then we have the photo means light. Then phosphorylation is addition of phosphate. Okay? So there is addition of phosphate out of photo or light. Okay? Now, in the chlorophyll here, which is found in the thylakoids, now you could see groups of pigments. Now, when we say groups of pigments, we call that as photosystems. Now, there in the chlorophyll, you have or say here, no? In the thylakoid, you could see active sites. In the thylakoid, you could see active sites which consist of groups of pigments. We call that as photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. So these are active sites in which they are very, very sensitive to light. No? These two are sensitive to light. So in a way that when the sun strikes, photosystem, say these photosystems, immediately chemical reaction would occur. Now say for example, here, when the sun strikes, this photosystem 2, where you can find it here in the thylakoid. Remember what is photosystem? This is group of pigments. So that includes chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B. Then you have the carotenoids, xanthophylls. So you have anthocyanins. So those are different pigments which facilitate in the process. Now, when the sun strikes, the hydrogen from chlorophyll will be activated. So when of course, what is in the hydrogen of the chlorophyll? We have electrons. Electrons are the particles that are said to be participating in the chemical reaction. So when the sun strikes this active site photosystem 2, electrons from the hydrogen of the chlorophyll will be energized, and they are boosted up, and they are accepted they get excited. When they receive energy from light, they get excited. Like you, when you are energized because your mom sent you allowance, then you will be energized. You will be jumping because of joy. So the same is true with the electrons. When the electrons are energized by the light, then they get excited, then they jump to a higher level from the ground level to a higher level, and they are accepted by another chemicals, another molecules. We call this as electron acceptor. Now, the electron acceptor, this molecule accepts this electron, and this electron, once it is accepted, will be passed on to the different electron carriers. So, ipasa-pasa siya from one electron carrier to another. So, when it is passed on from one electron carrier to another, then that generates ATP. So, you have now one primary product, initial products, or say one of the products of the acyclic photophosphorylation, ATP molecules. What is this? Stands for? This is adenosine triphosphate. This is the energy currency of the cell. This is the energy that will be used by the cell. So, nana siya energy, so in a form of ATP. Now, once it releases energy class, the electrons will be deactivated and they land on the another active site. So here we have the photosystem 1. Photosystem 1, so we have here P700. Here P680. Why P680 and why P700? Now, the P here stands for photon or light. And this number stands for the wavelength. Now, this wavelength is said to be smaller than the wavelength that will be accepted in photosystem 2. So here, those smaller wavelength, the smaller the wavelength, the higher its frequency, the higher energy it contains. So, mas daghan ang energy ni diri. So, mas daghan. And diri, daggo ang wavelength. Like, for example, the red light. Diri, like, for example, blue light. The ultraviolet rays. Diri na siya i-accept sa photosystem 2. Gagmay kayo yung wavelength. wavelength is said to be very small. But for the red light, the red light has larger wavelength. Like for example, in the during sunrise, when you expose yourself, dili kayo init because it's red light. No? So the frequency is said to be lower and the wavelength is said to be bigger. And of course, that contains smaller energy. So here, when the electrons are de-energized, it landed on another active site, the photosystem 1. And since this is active site, then this will be again re-energized. Ma-energize na po siya, tagaan na po siya kwarta. Na po siya energy. So, jump up to a higher level, carried by electron acceptor, accepted by electron acceptor, carried by electron carriers. And we have the last carrier, the NADP. So, you have here the source of our electron, the energy, the H. What is this NADP stands for? Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. This is the last acceptor of electron in acyclic photophosphorylation. So here, the NADP is what? Reduced. So it undergoes reduction. When you say reduction, the ability to gain electrons. So ginansya siya og electron. So kung makaginansya og electron, na-reduce ang molecule. That undergoes reduction process. So we have this end products of acyclic photophosphorylation, ATP and the NADP. Now here, the electron is trapped by the NADP. It cannot go back to photosystem 2. So it's now trapped by the NADP. So in other words, there is what we call as electron loss. So what will the cell do to replace those lost electrons in photosystem 2? Now, here, the cell will make use of water. So we have here one of the raw materials, water. Now, unsa may mahimo sa water? Now, what will the cell do with this water? Now, water is split into two molecules, hydrogen and oxygen. Now, this hydrogen replaces the lost electrons here in the photosystem 2. Katong na-trap din nga electron na asa NADP karon, it's now replaced by the H2 from water. And how about the oxygen? This is now one of the end products. Asa ni gikan kaning oxygen? So gikan ni siya sa tubig out of the splitting of water. So this is the one that we are inhaling. Okay? Now remember, this is how God sustained the whole universe. With oxygen, with free oxygen. So, kanang water, bisag na sa canal, that could still be used by God as energy and replace the lost electrons here. See? So, regardless of how dirty we are in God's sight, then God can still use us as long as we are willing to be used. Like this water, whether it's very dirty from the CR, from the canal, from the septic tank, as long as this can be split and, of course, making use of the hydrogen to replace the lost electron and oxygen, that will be one of the, end products of photosynthesis. Now, remember how important oxygen is, class. And, of course, how much is 1 tank of oxygen? That is almost 1,000. Now, this time, because it's COVID, mas mahal pa yun. It's very, very expensive. So, what if God, allow us to to use oxygen as long as we pay Him? So, if God would say, okay, you pay me with the oxygen I gave you for, it's no longer free. What if God will sell the oxygen? So we will be we will be accountable for maybe several millions already. with your age and with my age, pila na ang imuhang accounts to the Lord for oxygen alone. So, we have to thank the Lord for giving us this free air, free oxygen.